We are here today for our breakout session to talk about identifying and preventing financial exploitation of elders and vulnerable adults and abuse, neglect, and exploitation in the District of Columbia. Our esteemed guest speakers include Jen Mika, the Counsel for Crowell and Mooring LLP, Amy Mix, the Director of DC Resource Bridge, and Matthew Ramos, Program Manager for the External Affairs Division, DC Office of the Inspector General. I will now turn it over to them.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Is this a good distance from my mouth? Okay, excellent. Yes, I'm Jennifer Mika. I'm currently at Crowell and Mooring, which has a robust healthcare law practice, and that's what I practice. But before that, I've had many different roles here in DC. I started off at the Department on Disability Services, handling guardianship matters on behalf of the agency for individuals with intellectual disabilities. I then became the district's first prosecutor, solely focused on financial exploitation of elders and vulnerable adults. I did that for several years before transitioning to a role handling mental health issues in criminal cases for the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I'm excited to be here today. Just wanted to give my fellow panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves a little bit more as well.
All right, also testing. All right, so Amy Mix, hi everyone. I am the director of the DC Resource Bridge, which is a brand new project launching Monday. So this is actually the first time anyone is hearing about it publicly. We got our shirts yesterday, so you know I was going to wear one today. And then we've got a table out here where you can get more information. I'll tell you all about the DC Resource Bridge the very last minute of this presentation. We have a slide that you know I had to slide in there. But previous to this role, I spent 16 years at Legal Counsel for the Elderly, handling fraud and financial exploitation and consumer protection matters. After that, I spent 3 years at the DC Office of the Attorney General, starting up their elder justice practice, also doing the civil enforcement side of the work that Jen was working on, which is how we know each other. And now I am heading up the DC Resource Bridge, which I can't wait to tell you all about. Stay here till the very, very end. All right, Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matthew Ramos. I'm here from the DC Office of the Inspector General. I do outreach for us. We handle any sort of fraud, waste, and abuse within district government, but also Medicaid fraud, which is what I'll be speaking on today. So I'll keep it short.
Great, so here's our obligatory PowerPoint slide on this. All right, so the first thing that Amy and I want to talk about is what is financial exploitation and how can you protect yourself and others from financial exploitation. So just from some stats, why this is important, at least 1 in 10 older adults have experienced some form of abuse in the last year. And more than 8,000 district elders experience abuse each year. So this is a significant issue. Amy?
My very favorite slide in this presentation. I love the graphic. So this is to tell you like why we come out and do these presentations, right? So for every one case of elder abuse that gets reported to an authority, there's another 23 that are under the surface, right? So the things that we hear about are just the tip of the iceberg. And so coming out and doing these kind of presentations to make sure you're aware of what elder abuse or exploitation can look like helps bring to light the other 23. And we didn't say at the very beginning, but this is really informal. So if anyone has questions, just raise your hand or shout something out while we're talking.
We're going to have some additional question time at the end, but certainly we have a small enough group that you should feel free to raise your hand and we can talk about anything related to the slides. Amy?
Oh, my second favorite.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one, who commits abuse and exploitation? And I just take a second to look at the slide. And I'm just curious, you don't have to necessarily answer out loud, but is there anyone on here that surprises you? I mean, you may be all as jaded and experienced as I am, and maybe no one surprises you. I see some laughing. I know we have a lot of social workers here in the crowd. Boom, I love the graphic, right? So it could be anyone. The point of that slide, right, is that it really, we can find elder abuse and exploitation anywhere.
And when the reason why we talk about financial exploitation in particular for elders is that has anybody heard of something called the silver tsunami that's happening right now Yes, we have baby boomers that are increasingly, they're getting older, they're retiring, and they hold the majority of the wealth in our country. So obviously, exploiters and scammers go to where the money is. And so it's no wonder that they would be focused on our elder population because they hold all the wealth. And this is also bears out in the annual loss range that we see, which is just in the billions of dollars, which is really terrifying to think about. It's the most common form of elder abuse, and it often goes hand in hand with other forms of abuse and neglect, but it's often the least reported. It's just less obvious. So just to kind of level set, when we talk about financial exploitation, we really just mean the illegal or improper use of elders' funds, property, or assets. So we have a couple different examples here, and I think Amy's going to talk in the next slide about what we mean in DC. But it's important to think about exploitation as not just taking money, but also putting financial or legal obligations on an individual. So this could be a reverse mortgage, a loan for a car, something that they don't get the benefit of, but they are saddled with the expense for. So I think it's important to think about it in a very broad way.
So the district does actually define financial exploitation. There's a great model statute here in DC, which should surprise nobody. There's lots of great model statutes here in DC, and this is one, and when this was passed, it created civil and criminal enforcement powers in the district to go after people who have financially exploited an elder, and then that's what Jen and I did. So the definition in the district is using deception, intimidation, or undue influence to use the elder or vulnerable adult's money or property for someone else's benefit. So I put an example here, like using the elder's debit card to pay for someone else's vacation. We saw that a lot at the AG's office. Or, as Jen mentioned, getting the elder or vulnerable adult to enter into some legal obligation that's not for their benefit. So co-signing on a student loan or buying a car. We see a lot of those cases too. And then the last is kind of a catch-all, any other violation of any other law that tends to get access to the elder's property or money.
Yeah, the one other thing that I want to highlight about this is that it's not just those examples, but it's also the way that the person does the exploitation that is so great about the DC law.
Go to the next slide. Is that where you're going?
It was. I mean, that's one way, but there's also deception and intimidation. But the other great thing about the DC law is the inclusion of undue influence.
Yeah. Again, a model statute, Jen. Yeah, so it's very broad. When we helped draft this statute, if you read it, this paragraph goes for a long time and it has a lot of commas in it. So it's like you can do it this way or that way or this way or that way or this way. And so we try to capture everything, right? So it's using mental, emotional, physical coercion to make somebody do something that's against their best interest. So causing them to act in a way that's not consistent with their own financial well-being. Which is very cool, because I will say before the law was passed, I was aware of a case where a financial planner had gotten an elder to make him the beneficiary of her estate, and she died, and he got all of her money, and that matter wasn't prosecuted because she signed on the dotted line. And so it was like, well, she consented, she signed. Yes, but she had diminished capacity, which isn't, by the way, a factor. You don't have to have diminished capacity to fall into this statute. She did have diminished capacity, and he had wormed his way into her life. She didn't have local family. He did all of her grocery shopping. He cut her off from all of her, distant family. He took her to the doctor's office and then got made her beneficiary. So had that happened now, it would have fit very squarely under undue influence.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's so great and why it's important that this statute is so broad is that, from a prosecutor's perspective, we have to think about the elements that we have to prove in order to bring a case. And before this statute, we really had to just rely on the basic financial crimes like theft or fraud. And they have very defined specific elements that you have to meet. And what this did was give us a bit more flexibility and gave us different elements that we could work with to prove up a criminal case like that. Because a lot of people oftentimes just think about those things and financial exploitation generally as a civil issue. And sometimes I know, because I've seen this happen, that people will say, they'll call the police and the police will be like, well, that's just a civil issue, please go sue them. And this empowers MPD. It empowers local prosecutors, both at OAG and at the U.S. Attorney's Office, to actually pursue criminal charges, which sometimes is the most effective way to help prevent exploitation from happening in the future. So let's talk about some signs of financial exploitation. I think the reason why that iceberg picture is so important is because I don't think people really it's harder to notice these signs compared to a bruise or a bed sore. So that's part of the reason why financial exploitation, I think, goes unreported, is because it can kind of, it's kind of under the surface. And if you don't know what to look for, it's easy to miss. So some examples here are sudden changes in a person's bank account. So suddenly they're pulling out large amounts of money. Perhaps they're having money move through their bank account really rapidly. The inclusion of additional names on bank cards or on different accounts. Unpaid bills. So, the money is going out and it's not going to the places that it should. And there's no other explanation for why that's happening. Somebody has historically been really good about making sure that all their bills are paid on time, and then suddenly they're not paying those bills, either because they don't have money to do so or because, for other reasons. Uninvolved relatives suddenly claiming their right to somebody's affairs or possessions, somebody coming out of the woodwork and suddenly indicating that they're the one who's going to be taking care of mom or aunt or whoever. And then other kind of sudden changes in the assets that different family members have, and just general changes of lifestyle. This could mean suddenly they don't seem to have any food in the pantry, or that they are wearing threadbare clothes. But it could also be the opposite, because somebody is convincing them that we should totally go on that luxurious vacation, and I'm going to go with you, or that they're suddenly spending a lot both on themselves and on others. All these things are signs of exploitation.
Before you go,
Yeah, please.
yes. So the inclusion of additional names on the bank card signature, I just want to highlight, to the extent you all are working with elders in the community, finding other names on bills that regularly come to the house. So like a mortgage statement suddenly coming in someone else's name, a property tax bill coming in another name. Those are really good indicators that someone may have messed with title to a deed, which is a huge issue in the district. Credit card bills coming in someone else's name, but like looking through someone's mail and seeing what's arriving is very often how these things get discovered.
Yeah, I had a case that I think I'm going to highlight a little bit later, where it was a door-to-door security salesman, and he got his name on the ADT account. So even places like you wouldn't, like that doesn't kind of immediately strike you as like a financial thing, but he utilized that. He actually knew the code for her ADT, so that she had to call him in order to get like the alarm turned off, and like created a level of dependency that spiraled into some other things that I'm going to talk about later. But that's another example. So you just have to be really cognizant of like what is going on with those things. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How in the world do you distinguish between exploitative and a supportive type of relationship where family members are getting themselves involved to be helpful versus where they might be trying to take advantage?
So that's a great question, and it's like I stuck you in the audience. I don't know you. So it's like I stuck you in the audience,
I am
right?
not a plant.
So we used to calls a lot at LCE. I want to add my daughter to my deed in case something happens to me. I want to put my son on my bank account in case he needs to pay my bills for me. Do not do it. Do not add anyone to your deed. Do not add anyone to your bank account. Those are terrible things to do. You want to give someone the power to assist you in case you become incapacitated to do it at some later point. Sign a power of attorney, okay? You want to give your child your house and not have them have to go through probate. Sign a transfer on death deed. When you add someone to the title to your house right now, they half own it, depending on what your relationship is with it. They may fully own it with you, depending on who they are, right? And it also becomes, it's tied up with them. You want to do something with your house, you're ready to sell it and downsize, you need to go into a nursing home, whatever it is. That other person is saddled along with you. You've got to get them to agree to come off title. If they're in a car accident and someone sues them, guess what one of their assets is? My house, right? So I'm so glad you asked that question, because it comes up all the time, because it seems like such a natural thing to do, but there's lots of ways to do it that protect the person who owns the things, like a power of attorney, a transfer and death deed. I mean, it's really a time to talk with an experienced attorney to look at other alternatives. Thank you for asking that question. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about a couple examples of exploitation. This is actually a case that I prosecuted involving two SunTrust Bank employees. There was an elderly woman who would come into the bank to do her banking. Didn't do online banking like I'm sure the majority of us do. And so she got to know the employees of this particular branch very well because it was close to her house. And this particular, the bank manager and a personal banker started going to her house after hours, which is against bank policy, and convinced her that they were going to help her just move some money around so that it would be easier for her, and convinced her that was something that they were helping her out. What they were in fact doing was they had established bank accounts that they controlled, both at SunTrust and at another bank, and they were having her transfer the money into accounts that they controlled. They got I think it was $75,000 that way. And then they enjoyed it for themselves. One of them took several trips to Miami and California. He rented a red Mustang and stayed at a hotel on the beach with that money. All the while she was declining in health, and then subsequently was put into an assisted living facility, and all of her money was gone. She had this huge nest egg from her husband being in the military, from saving his Social Security, her Social Security, and it was all gone. Thankfully, in that case, the family member who stepped in and became her power of attorney and to help her kind of move forward recognized that this had happened before he took on his role, reported it to OAG. And we were able to prosecute that. We charged the two employees with 12 felony counts. They both pled guilty. They both agreed to pay back every cent. They're still on restitution plans. They are paying that money back. The court has actually extended their probation so that they can continue to pay. But that's one example of how we've utilized the criminal system to address one of these issues.
Yeah, so this is a civil case that I handled, my team handled at the AG's office. But it was similar. We had somebody who befriended an elder. He heard her story. They had grown up together, but I don't think that was true. And she used to she had his debit card and she controlled his bank account. He did have very diminished capacity in this instance. And she used to drive from Maryland into DC to get him to go to the bank to get some cash out when he said he needed it. Sometimes when he would say he needed it, often she wouldn't do it because the bank account was at zero because she was spending it on herself. But this was someone who was living in terrible housing conditions. I mean, any of you had walked in, you would have known something was wrong. An existing leak that had been there forever. He was sleeping on a broken couch. He was very disabled. Anyway, so she was taking all of his money, wasn't buying him food, and so we actually stepped in at the AG's office and we were able to get a very quick TRO, a temporary restraining order, to stop her from accessing the bank account. He did eventually get a guardian and a conservator because, frankly, he needed one at that point, and then she was prosecuted in the civil court.
Yeah, I think what this highlights compared to the previous case is there's some really great tools that you have on the civil side to move quickly, because you have to stop the hemorrhaging of money. That's one of the most important things to do, because it's very difficult to get the money back. In the case of those two SunTrust employees, they had already spent it all, and they had no money. So it's not like there was a lot that we could get out of them. So the sooner that you can address these issues, the better, and to limit the loss. Now,
do we know, does everybody get a copy of the slides from the presentation? Okay, so we can make them available. I think we should talk about scams just kind of generally real quickly so that
agree.
we can turn this over to Matthew, who's sitting
Yeah.
here so patiently.
Agree.
So if I can just give you like a few highlights, you'll get the slides. We've actually
Yeah.
broken out all the different kinds of scams because each one has a little bit of different stuff to look
Excuse
for.
me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can I ask you regarding the last subject?
Yes.
Is there any responsibility on the bank's part to reach out or speak up if they see exploitation? I've gotten phone calls after the fact when a bank manager tells me they're walking out of here after, taking out some money out, but it's like, shouldn't they
Yep.
be more proactive or have some type of legal obligation?
So it sounds, I think Amy might want to say some things about this as well, but I'll start. So all banks are required to report to the federal government any suspicious activity. They usually have internal, the entire units that are devoted to investigating these things, and then they have to report them to law enforcement. It's law enforcement then that is obligated to do something about it. There's are always people in law enforcement that are tasked with reviewing all those suspicious activity reports and actually doing something about them. But the other thing that individuals can do to help in those situations is to designate a trusted individual on their account. It's not somebody who has power over their account or that can make decisions, but it's a contact that you've designated and told the bank, I trust this person. You can tell them about the information going on in my account. And if you designate that, then the bank will reach out to that person and flag if there's something weird going on. And then that person can take action. But those are the two things that I would say to that point. I don't know if Amy has anything to add.
I'll chime in just very briefly, having also spent 3 years at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau as a senior litigator over there. So also file complaints. If you're seeing it, let your federal regulators, who may or may not be able to answer phones right now, everyone send a thought up into the universe for the CFPB. But report it federally, report it locally. The authorities, once they know about these things, might be able to take some sort of enforcement action, but it has to be reported. Yeah. And that's, I'm picking that up. Love it. Yeah.
I was asking if doesn't the bank call you the customer too?
Oh, if they, yeah. So there's a lot of exploitation, and so it's one of the common scam kind of tactics here is that the scammer will tell the victim, "Don't tell anybody what this is for." I heard this so many times. Someone went into the bank and pulled out like $40,000, and the teller would say to them, "What is this for? Are you sure it's okay to take this money out? Are you sure no one's around the corner telling you to do this?" Like they would try really hard. But the scammers are so convincing. The bank's gonna ask you what this is for. This is your business. Don't tell anybody. Or, I've got your grandson somewhere. Don't tell them because I'll hurt him. There's a lot of, and they don't. It's a lot of made up threats and a lot of convincing language. The scammers are very good at what they do. So sometimes the person is right there at the desk and the customer is the one pulling out the money and turning around and handing it to the scammer. Yeah.
Amy, I just want to highlight home and roof repairs, and then if there's one that you want to highlight, then I think we can move on so that Matt has an opportunity to talk. So I just want to emphasize home and roof repairs are kind of door-to-door sales folks, especially because I think AG Schwab just recently issued an alert about solar folks that are coming door-to-door. This is actually another one that I prosecuted. It was a door-to-door security salesman. He would come to the door and say, "Hey, I'm selling security systems. Do you need something?" He would target neighborhoods where there are a lot of elderly folks living. And he also, once he kind of got to your door and you opened it, he would also say, "By the way, I'm also a pastor." And I would, and that really resonates with people. People tend to trust the clergy and people of faith. And he utilized that level of trust with this particular woman to convince her to write him a bunch of checks and then to have him be her power of attorney, which he then used to get a reverse mortgage on her home and was able to get upwards of $80,000 out of her house that way before her family figured it out. And at that point, there's nothing that they can do. All that generational wealth is going out the door because she's lost all the equity in her house that she had built up. So this is just another highlight. It's really just anybody who comes to you and is pressing you to do something immediately or is right in your face and saying I can do this right now. make sure you check references. You can always take your time. You don't have to jump into anything just because somebody is coming to the door and saying, like, I'm going to do this for you right now. So I just wanted to highlight that one. Did you want to say anything?
So not one particular, but just common elements. So when you see the slides, you're going to see there's repetitive language on here. But often there's an element of like urgency. Yeah. It feels too good to be true, but they talk you into it. And very often the victim is asked to go get gift cards. I'm sure you've all probably seen that before or heard about it I've got some nods over here. I had a client at LC once who brought me this big envelope and she dumped it out and it was like 75 Google Play cards that she had gotten, and she'd scratched off the back and then texted the pictures to the scammers.
Totally untraceable.
Totally untraceable, and it was to pay an IRS debt, right? So it's just remembering the government doesn't ask you for Google Play cards, but it sounds convincing when they say it, right? They're so good at what they do, and they just need one person to fall for it for their whole year to be made. So anyway, you'll see the slides, you'll see some examples. Okay, we'll stop. Okay, you have one. Click it. So skip that. Okay. We're going to come back to it for 1 minute when the time comes.
I don't know where his deck is.
Oh, there's another deck.
Yep. I think they're getting it.
Okay. Then I will tell you about the DC Resource Bridge. All right, I'm going to take 1 minute while we're loading this slide, right? No dead time here. The DC Resource Bridge, there's a table out here. You can visit it and get one of our flyers. We launch on Monday. Very exciting. Please don't call us before Monday. Please don't give the number out before Monday. We are, on Monday, going to be one phone number where district residents can call if they want to get connected with a free legal services office. So there's 45 or 50 different offices in town, and you never know exactly who does what or what I'm eligible for. You call us, you get to talk to one of our trained navigators. 2 of them are out there at the table, Bernie and Emma, and they will get information based on the information you give us, based on what your legal needs are, and based on what the legal services office does. We will connect you. It's not just a phone number and a good luck. We actually do a referral through our system. We find out whether it's stuck and whether the legal services office is going to give you a lawyer to talk to. If they're not, they let us know that, and we try again. All right, we've got about 21 partners we're starting with in the areas of consumer and financial protection, family law, public benefits, and court of appeals cases. But every couple of months, we'll be rolling out new practice areas until eventually, in about a year and a half, we reach them all. Okay, so just spread the word. We open Monday. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Matthew Ramos, like I said earlier. I'm here with the Office of the Inspector General. And first off, thanks DC Courts for having us here. Love this program. Now, I'm here to talk about abuse, neglect, and exploitation in DC, but they covered a lot of what of what's going to be in here, so I'm just going to kind of breeze over those. But just to kind of give you an idea of what it is, because I do think that a lot of that is important to keep in mind what it looks like and how to detect it and what you need to do when you do detect it. So what we're going to do, though, is go through a few questions. What is the OIG? What is the MFUCU or MFCU? What is fraud, abuse, neglect, and exploitation? And how can I contact the OIG? I don't mean to keep throwing more acronyms at you, because a lot of other DC government agencies will. But just to let you know, the Office of the Inspector General is an independent executive agency that works to prevent fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption mismanagement in district government programs. Now, we also do Medicaid fraud. I'm going to get into that in a second, but we do have 4 particular missions when it comes to what OIG does. We independently audit, inspect, and investigate matters that pertain to the District of Columbia government to prevent and detect corruption, fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. That sounds like a lot, but all of this really concerns the conduct of an individual. Think someone getting a bribe, or someone, a DC government employee, basically, working 2 jobs at the same time and stealing the district resources, or anyone who's using district time, or other things like whether it's a district vehicle or a district credit card for personal uses. That would fall under this. We also do promote economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability when it comes to DC government, but this concerns the acts of the agency in general. So if you know of a district government agency that isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, if you're not getting any sort of feedback from the calls that you're making to them, if they're not answering any other questions that you need them to, we could be a resource to help plug you into like a way to get around that. And we do so by informing the public of what we do, informing the stakeholders, basically just communicating to the public what our investigations are of, and then also recommend and track the things that we have investigated, so that way we could let the public know, give them an update about what we've seen as well. Which brings us over to our next question: what is MFUCU? Earlier, it's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. Now, every state and plus DC, plus the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico has a MFUCU unit. It's actually administrative oversight is done by the Office of the Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. But our job is to prevent Medicaid provider fraud and the abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation of residents in healthcare facilities. And so you don't necessarily have to be even receiving Medicaid to get that. It's basically, if it's a facility that receives those benefits and there's something going on that we need to know about, please let us know. Now, the district MFUCU is a little bit different. If you live in Maryland or Virginia, you're going to have your own over there. They're usually handled by the Office of the Attorney General for that state. DC is a little bit weirder just because of our own, of how DC is set up. And so it's done with the Office of the Inspector General. It's done in partnership. We do have prosecutors that work for us and the U.S. Attorney's Office, so that way we don't have to just forward stuff to them. It can be a joint sort of thing. Now, a lot of this over here was already covered, so I don't want to go through that again, but there are other types of abuse besides financial abuse. There's also physical abuse and sexual abuse that you, as a provider or caretaker of someone, may also recognize as well. Now, for criminal abuse, DC has very specific definitions of what that looks like. I'm not a lawyer or a prosecutor, so I'm not going to pretend that I am the best resource for that, but when it comes to what it looks like in general, we can put you in touch with the people that do. A person is guilty of criminal abuse of a vulnerable adult or elderly person if they inflict any of those or physical pain, or use repeated or malicious oral or written statements just to threaten someone. When it comes to sexual abuse of a ward, patient, client, or prisoner, that's also very well defined in DC law. Like we said earlier, if you're able to get the slides or get a copy of it, please do. There's a lot of great information in every presentation that you're seeing here today. But some common red flag indicators of abuse that they kind of touched on earlier. If you notice that someone in your care is fearful of their provider coming in, or someone else coming in, a caretaker, coworker coming in, and they have injuries that don't match the explanation given. If you notice like something different with their weight, if you notice any symptoms of anxiety, depression, or confusion that may have came unexpectedly, if they're running away from family members or friends, or if you broken bones, anything like that, please contact us at MFUCU.
Matthew, can I just say one thing
yeah.
about that? For the social workers in the room, you should know that you're a mandatory reporter. And so for all of these things that we're talking about, you have a duty to report. I can't recall the exact standard for like the level of knowledge that you have, but you should be aware of that, and that if there can potentially be civil penalties or criminal penalties for failing to report. So I just wanted to flag that really quick for the audience.
Thank you very much. Also, similar sort of slide when it comes to neglect and what that looks like here in DC. If you notice, any sort of poor appearance or hygiene, you've heard some of these before, like changes in behavior, again with the weight loss, any physical problems such as bed sores, things like that do need to get documented by somewhere, and we're the ones to do that too. When it comes to financial exploitation, I'm just going to kind of go past that for right now since they kind of covered that. But common perpetrators of any of this could be any caregivers, facility bankers. We do have a case that I'm going to show in a second where the facility banker at a residential facility was basically keeping the money that the residents should have been using themselves. Family members, friends, basically, like they said earlier, anyone. Trusted others, strangers that become trusted all of a sudden is another one as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when it came to this one, is from a skilled nursing facility where the person used their position to basically withdraw money from someone else's account. And that's a thing that we prosecuted, or our Mufuku unit prosecuted when it came to how that turned out. Same thing could happen when it comes to, any of these other cases over here. Excuse me.
That one, she was stealing from the veterans benefits, and she was using it to pay her own personal bills. And veterans only get, so, just like Social Security, you only get so much after the rest of it goes to the facility already. So, and she would rotate around to different providers. So she would be she would be the owner of one provider, and that provider will get shut down because DOH or Mufuku would see something was suspicious going on, and then they would just pack up and then repackage as a different provider, and then start back up again.
Mm-hmm. Another common way to exploit others is by having or billing for hours that actually weren't used. So if you're seeing any sort of bills for services that weren't actually provided, any durable medical equipment or medications that weren't actually provided, that's also fraudulent, and that's a thing that we can look into as well. And then for this particular one over here, that was more of a bigger case when it came to fraudulently billing Medicaid. But when you see any of those things, Mufuku can help. This is probably the most important slide that I have to show you today. If you don't want to wait to receive the slides, please take a picture of this one. It's a thing to commonly remember if you're in DC especially. In order to report any sort of fraud, waste, abuse, or corruption, or Medicaid abuse, please do so at hotline.inspectorgeneral@dc.gov, or you can call us at 202-724-TIPS, which is 8477. There's also a web form on our website that you can fill out as well. If you can come into the office if you want to do it confidentially that way. We're over in Navy Yard at 100 M Street Southeast. And if you also just want to know more of what we're doing, if you use that QR code right there, you could actually get a weekly blast that we send out that talks about some of the cases that we actually work on. You can also follow us on social media as well. And with that, I guess if there's any questions.
Expertise up here, so please feel free.
Hello, it's nice to see you guys. I'm Debbie Ahern. I'm a court-appointed examiner and visitor. And I have a question, and I think I've talked to you all before. So in my role as either an examiner or visitor, I might see things that are illegal and inappropriate. And I never know if I should let you all know. I think in the past I would report some cases that were just so horrible, I couldn't believe it. But then I'm told, well, they have a guardian. So, I mean, does it go away, or should I still continue to report it? Because I'm either people are desperate or they're just not very bright, especially with finding people putting their names on the deeds all the time. And so I haven't called you guys in a long time, but is it something that I should do?
That's a great question. If you see something, say something. You don't have to actually prove that there's something wrong going on. That's our job. Let our investigators work on it, and they'll do that for you. But please, if you notice anything that is abnormal, let us know. I don't know if you had anything else.
I'd encourage the guardian to also reach out because they might not always know the resources or what they should do, but they have a lot, they have the authority to do a lot, and sometimes they just need some direction or information, and that not me now in my current role, unless it's something that I could consider for pro bono, or we can talk offline. But definitely reaching out to OAG and to Mufuku, and just I think it's and documenting it in your report. I think is just so important. Just having that documentation. Yeah. Did you want to?
I did want to add, and Adult Protective Services.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
so we kind of blew past the slide, but on the slide we had Adult Protective Services, which should probably be your first call. We had the DC Office of the Attorney General, and we had MPD. If it rises to a situation where there's an emergency situation, some sort of, MPD would be a good resource for that. But yeah, Adult Protective Services. And when you report to Adult Protective Services, they do have a line that's answered, I believe, 24/7, and you can report anonymously. So if you don't want to share who you are, you can do that. But then they'll send someone, depending on what the allegations are, then they'll decide if they need to send someone out to actually go visit the house and see what's going on.
So it's great to see all of you. And I wanted to go back to the undue influence and the issue about financial exploitation. I thought it was helpful this morning to hear that financial capacity diminishes earlier and is not as visible. But one of the things I'm running into periodically, and so I'd love to hear from you as you, since you've seen my reports periodically, is there are a lot of times I feel like people are like, it's just a bad decision, right? Adults have the right to make bad decisions all the time. And so sometimes I'm trying to figure out how do I actually, I know it's undue influence and I know the person may not have total diminished capacity. They actually show up pretty well on testing because they have residual educational experience, et cetera. So I end up in this thing, if the scores aren't low enough, then it's a bad decision versus this person has incapacity and around this particular topic. I'm just wondering what needs to be in documentation so that it flags like this is actually happening.
So you don't have to be incapacitated to
I think
have
you guys
undue
know that.
influence.
I don't know that other people know.
That's fair. Okay. Yeah. So undue influence can happen to any of us, right? I worked with an investigator, and his analogy was that you're between a rock and a hard place, where somebody has pressured you so much that you feel like your only option is to agree with what they're asking you to do. And I think that's a good way of thinking about it. So I would say, I also don't think you shouldn't feel like it's on you to establish or prove or, any of that. I think the key things are just documenting what this decision was, what the person said about the decision, and what the surrounding circumstances were. Just documenting as much as you can in real time as you're seeing it is the most important thing that you can do, because one of the challenges that I face regularly and prosecutors face in these kind of cases is that by the time you get the case, the victim oftentimes can't really tell you what's going on. So you have to use a lot of circumstantial evidence in order to piece together what that conversation looked like. For example, that case where I talked about the door-to-door salesman, by the time we connected with her, she was just, we were able to hear some of her story, but not all of it. And thank goodness the ADT records their customer phone calls, because we were able to learn, we could hear what was going on in those phone calls. And so it's just documenting in the moment. That's what's the most important thing that you can do, the role that you play.
Yeah, but I would like to, I saw you raise, it's a very good point that you raise, right? Because people do have the right to make bad decisions, right? Yeah. I had a client once when I was at Legal Counsel for the Elderly who was in his 80s and had befriended a very young woman who became his companion, and he gave her a lot of money, and they were going to get married. And so immediately I was like, oh my God, this is clearly financial exploitation. But actually the amount of money he was giving her, query how he got to my office, because I was at Legal Counsel for the Elderly, so he probably wasn't eligible for services, but he got in the door, and he had plenty of money. It wasn't actually adverse to his financial interests to take care of her. He had plenty of money to do it. He was articulating to me, I don't have any family. I can't take it with me. I enjoy her company. All right then. My initial reaction though is all of you where I was like, oh God, this is going to be an exploitation case. We're going down this road. And I walked down there and I was like, all right, well, I wish them luck. Anyway, I'm not saying and I think Jen's point that you don't have to be the final arbiter, right? It's up to the enforcement authorities to figure out how to prove to a court what's going on. That's their burden. But yeah, people can, they have the right to make a decision. I think if it's against their own financial well-being is really the key. So documenting that because this money was given to her, he didn't have food, he didn't have medicine, he wasn't repairing his leaking roof, that kind of thing.
And preventing yourself from being in that position in the first place by having advanced directives in place and making sure everybody knows what your preferences are, and having the everything in place so that you don't get to that point where people are having to wonder whether you made a bad decision or you are exploited.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here, Probate Court, presenting this. Mr. Ramos, you said something that really triggered me, and if you see something, do something. I am a guardian, and also I am an officer, a president of the Family Council at a local long-term care center. We have an issue where I was trying to discover what the payment, self-payment was for the residents and how you determine what's paid to through Medicare. The sum of it was, I discovered that the processes for recertification were not officially being carried out by the fiduciary persons, that the facility was somehow initiating it. They said this is because COVID period, and the government said they could do this. However, this was going on prior to COVID and post-COVID. The issue was, how it impacted us was our guardianship responsibilities were basically taken away and ignored because they didn't even communicate they were doing this. We had an ombudsman to come in and have meetings with us and an official from Department of Health and determined that I stated, what you're doing is illegal. I'm a guardian, you took that right from me when you never communicated what you were doing. My name wasn't even in the system. They didn't even know my name wasn't in the system. The impact, now currently alive, the situation is there were several people, don't want to miss this key point. So we did deal with OIG. The ombudsman sent a letter saying they were conducting this practice. It was illegal, and he told them to stop, desist. And what were you guys, OIG and Department of Health, going to do about it? I got a one-liner response from the ombudsman that said they'll let Department of Health handle it. It has not been handled. We've not gotten any due diligence response. And actually, I was about to bring it to the OAG's office because I didn't know what else to do with it. The impact has been several families have been asked after this recertification period that had been executed in the correct manner to pay delinquent amounts of several thousands. Some had decided, well, let me pay this. I don't want my loved one to lose their placement. I am actually one of those, they're telling me I owe several $1,000s. And I can talk offline about the remainder of that concern. But what's interesting to me is that the organization that you described to protect and to defend these elderly, vulnerable population from this kind of practices, and as the authorized representatives, it sounds like that's failed us. Not sounds like, I believe it's failed us. Can you please address that? And I'd like to talk with you guys offline, but can you address that for us publicly? Thank you.
We can meet after this, definitely. But first off, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But also, I wish you didn't really have to. Our investigators can look into that as well. And I do want to differentiate between federal OIG for HHS, which is not who I'm representing, and OIG for the District of Columbia, which does have, like I said, the Mafuku unit that would look into that itself, but there is a difference between the two. If it is like a systemic issue, like something that's going on that the facility is doing, even if it's not, doesn't fall under a criminal statute, we can still look into it to make sure that they know the proper procedure and that they follow it. And so if there is something there, we can definitely look into it. Please let us know, and we will.
I'm going to carry on real quick, just not about that issue particularly, but you mentioned the long-term care ombudsman. So I just want to raise them up as a resource also. They're actually speaking right now on a different panel. So you guys could have heard them, but you came to us. Thank you so much. I'll do what they would have done, right? So the long-term care ombudsman, they oversee the quality of care in nursing homes, residential care facilities, and other long-term care services. They are housed at Legal Counsel for the Elderly, but they're a great resource. If you're not familiar with the long-term care ombudsman, there is an LCE table out here. They could probably give you information, but Mark Miller, the DC long-term care ombudsman, is on a panel in another room. He'll be circulating around, but you should take an opportunity to meet him.
And also, if it's something that we actually don't look into, we will refer it to the proper agency that will.
So.
I get calls with some frequency related to wards who are in long-term care facilities to add a layer of insurance, which won't cost anything. It's free to you because it comes out of Medicaid and it comes out of something you don't see. And my instinct is always like, that sounds like a scam. But they're going to get hearing checks, and they're going to get dentistry checks and all these kinds of things. Is there a database somewhere where you can look to see which ones are legitimate and which ones are not? Or is there just an assumption that none of them are legitimate, and if somebody's on Medicaid, they're going to be cared for?
I really wish there was a database like the one you were speaking of. But really, if something does sound suspicious, just to let us know. When it comes to people who are receiving without even asking for it, services that they didn't request, that could be something that we would probably look into.
So I appreciate all the hard work that you all do, and I think I've seen Amy mix in like all her jobs in all my divisions, but it seems to me that what you all three do is loss mitigation. So what are the proactive things we're doing to educate people, middle-aged people, while they're still competent, or even things that are not financial exploitation, like reverse mortgages, which are, in my view, a disaster. But what are some? Do we have programs in our community centers, our wellness centers, our senior centers, where we're trying to educate these people, or even clinics where, okay, today we're doing powers of attorney and so on?
So I'm pretty sure that the DC Bar Pro Bono Center is building out its elder justice focus, and so I think that they are increasing the number of clinics and resources that they have for these types of issues to help address for folks in the community, so that it doesn't get to the point of needing to come to one of the offices that we have or had worked at. So I think that's one thing that I would say. Do you have other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I know, so for example, Legal Counsel for the Elderly, to give them one more plug, they're out here. You could always get a phone number, call that, like if you are involved in some sort of community group, or you're familiar with like a senior center who might want a speaker to come out, they send people out all the time. I love doing outreach. I used to go out and do it all the time when I was there. I did it a lot at the AG's office too. A lot of the slides you've seen today are slides that Jen and I have given this presentation 1,000 times to different groups in town. And so there are organizations and groups that will come out and educate people. Also, Legal Counsel for the Elderly does a lot of, I think they probably still do, some outreach about like getting powers of attorney in place, a lot of estate planning kind of stuff, because that's what you want, right? You want to, while you're able to make decisions for yourself, you want to let people know what your choices are, and you want to put them on paper. And you want to do it the right way, so you want to do it with a lawyer. So I would recommend, just like I said, don't add people to your deed. I would recommend against using those forms you can download from the internet for wills and powers of attorney. For example, DC has a very weird little statute that talks about if your power of attorney addresses real property rights, you have to have this weird paragraph at the top on the first page in all bold and all caps. Most states don't have that. And so when you download that form online, it's going to be missing that. DC's got some quirks. So I really do recommend talking to an attorney to have those documents done.
And if you do know of any facilities or community groups that would like, I would love to go out there and talk to them as well. I'm sure any of my colleagues at DACL or the Department of AIDS and Community Living or Adult Protective Services would definitely want to do the same thing. It's just a matter of us getting out into the community.
And I would say also, if you're, if you have somebody who's involved with DDS, if you're a guardian or you're involved I know Neha Patel, when I was there, I would do the presentations about advanced directives and powers of attorney. And while I know if you're a guardian, then we've already kind of passed that point, but maybe not. And like maybe there is an opportunity to maybe transition to a power of attorney or to still think about advanced planning in terms of end-of-life decisions and financial planning for those individuals as well.
Oh, and you mentioned Neha because she's going to be on a panel later today. I saw
sure
her.
Is.
Also,
Where is she? Is she hiding?
She's
there she is hiding.
We cannot. There's a very bright light. There we go. Raise your hand. You can all come see her later. And there's also a panel. I don't know if it's that one or not on sort of the less restrictive alternatives. So like supported decision making agreements, right? That you can enter into. That's something a step down from a power of attorney. So there's a lot of tools in the district, and you'll hear about many of them today. But yeah, encourage folks to look into this.
Family member or legal professional can take to proactively prevent financial exploitation, I'd appreciate it.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
Start.
And I think it's like just have conversations,
That's
right?
what I was gonna say,
That's why I went
too.
first, because I thought you might say that. And Jen's got to come up with another one. But like these are conversations, people are very embarrassed to say they got duped. It is embarrassing. Like, what was I thinking? Google Pay cards to pay my taxes? Duh. Like, it's embarrassing. And there's a lot of stigma attached to it. But there shouldn't be, because like I said, these guys are really good at what they're doing. They just have to get one person and their whole year is made. So I think having these conversations, making sure people know that you're a safe space to come to when it's like, hey, this guy called me. He told me I shouldn't tell anyone, but we've talked about it, and that was like one of the red flags I should look for.
So I'm going to say have conversations, but a little bit different. So I feel like it's distinguishable. So I agree with those. And I would also say, like, do not feel ashamed, like, about this. I remember there was actually like a head of the FBI, a former head of the FBI that was exploited. And he felt strongly that he and his wife felt strongly they needed to come forward and tell people, because people don't think that people in power could be duped. And so like it can happen to anyone. So I think you should have those conversations, but you should also have the conversations that precede those or prevent those conversations from having to happen by talking to people about what your preferences are, what you want, like who you want to run your finances, who you want to be taking care of your house, who you want to be making decisions for you if you can't, what kind of decisions you want to have made. Those are other conversations that people feel really uncomfortable talking about. Nobody wants to talk about how the fact that mom is looking like she doesn't understand her finances anymore. Nobody wants to talk about what happens if, God forbid, one of us gets incapacitated and what's going to happen. Like all of these, I know that's not necessarily directly for financial exploitation, but it's all tied in there. And if we can just talk more about the plans that we have and the things that we want going forward into our older age, then that also prevents those conversations about being duped.
I think while you're having that conversation,
I love it.
Just talk more.
It's just knowing, letting them know what resources they have or that they could reach out to. The same way you would plan for any sort of emergency, like whether it's a fire or a flood, you should, have our phone number on your fridge as well. Just like know who you can reach out to in the time of emergency.
Well, we thank you all for your expertise. It's been wonderful.